Hi guys, today we are going to start our study on the French and Indian War. And what that means is we are going to see what happened to the 13 colonies from the time that they became the colonies to the American Revolution, or when the colonies separated from Britain to form their own country. Now, the French and Indian War has tons of names. In Britain, they call it the 7 Years' War because, I mean, technically it was fought for 9 years, but for the time that Britain recognizes the war, it was 7 years long. It was called the French and Indian War. It was also called the Pomeranian War by another country. It has lots of different names, but we're going to call it the French and Indian War for our study. Today, we're going to look at the causes and effects of the French and Indian War. Every war has something that starts it. No one just goes out and says, yeah, I'm going to start a war today. There's always things that build up to it. And there's also tons of effects of a war. That a war is a major thing and it causes a lot of things to happen. So let's take a look at what the French and Indian War, what caused it, and then the effects that came from it. So we've been studying the 13 original colonies, and we've really just focused on this area right here, where the British colonies were. We have our New England colonies up here, our middle colonies here, and our southern colonies here, but we haven't talked about what was happening on the rest of North America. So let's talk about that really quick. So everything in yellow is territory that was owned by Britain. So like we said, the 13 colonies were British colonies. They also had a lot of what is now Canada. If you remember back to when we were studying European explorers, you'll remember we talked about Henry Hudson and how he came in on what's now called the Hudson River. And so this is what's named after him, called the Hudson's Bay Company. Now, everything in green, which you notice is a lot of territory, is owned by the French. Everything from Louisiana down here all the way up to northern Canada. Now, there are a lot of places that are within this green area that still have a lot of French speaking or French influence there. So if you look over here, we have Quebec, we have Montreal. This is all French speaking Canada. Fun fact, there's a law in this region of Canada that everything that is printed, like a label or a sign or anything like that, has to be printed in both English and French because they have two official languages. Now, if you travel way down here to what has become Louisiana, this shape right here is Louisiana. There's a lot of French-speaking people and a lot of French influence in here too. And that all goes back to the history of this area being owned by France. Now, if you look over here, this is the blue area is all owned by Spain. When we were studying those early European explorers, we talked about Ponce de Leon and other Spanish explorers who all came looking, who all came looking for gold and new resources for Spain. And this is where they landed, and they claimed this land in the name of Spain. So as you can see, the British area, the English territory here, is just this little sliver right here. There's a lot of land here in the middle that's owned by the French. And this was a main cause of the French and Indian War. So let's look through it. So the French and Indian War was fought between, it was basically like two teams. On one team was the colonists and the British, and the other team is the French and the Native Americans. Now, if I flip you back to our map here, this is a large bit of territory. Why do you think the Native Americans would want to fight alongside the French? I'll give you a second to think about that. So keep that thought in your mind, and we're going to look at the perspectives of different groups during this week, and you'll be able to see why it would make sense for Native Americans to want to fight alongside the French. Now, one idea for the cause of the French and Indian War was the land. So most wars are caused by economy or ways to make more money, and land. And land was a really big contributing factor to the French and Indian War. So both France and Britain wanted control of the Ohio River Valley, which was really good farming, but it also gave access to a lot of rivers that went really far, which opened up trade. Now, another cause was people. The British colonists moved into regions that weren't owned by the English or by Britain, that were owned by the French, and this got in the way of the trade that was happening between the Native Americans and the French. The Native Americans and French had formed kind of like a little alliance where they worked together in the fur trade and different goods that they benefited one another. And the British colonists moved into this area, which blocked some of the trade routes that the Native Americans and the French used. And number 3 is conflict. So this war in the Americas is one of many, many wars between France and Britain. They have a very troubled history. Now let's look at that first effect. So we looked at our causes right here. Now we're going to go into effects. So after the war was over, what had happened? So something called the Treaty of Paris, which was really important here, and that happened in 1763. So think of, let's look at this map right here on the left. This is the original map that I showed you. So yellow is the British, green is French, and this purple area or pinkish area is the Spanish, and then you could see this on the other map because I had made it bigger, but way over here is Russian territory, because if you go this way is where Asia and Russia are, or Russia's part of Asia, but China and Russia are right over here on the map. Now, after the Treaty of Paris, look at how the stuff changed. So now the green, it was French on the other map, but the green represents the British territory. It's all of this area now. Now, this pink part is still the Spanish colonies, which is huge. But all of this yellow stuff over here is the French. Now, this was considered a big win for the British colonies because they were given this lot of area here, except earlier I had mentioned that wars are usually caused by land, or the other one was economy. And one of the biggest economy factors, or the biggest money-making factors during this time, was actually sugar cane. And if you look over here, this part of the world is where a lot of sugar cane is grown. So the Spanish and French that are over here now ended up getting a lot of valuable things in the Treaty of Paris. So the Treaty of Paris did a couple things. It ended the war. France relinquished or gave up all of its land in North America. And everything east, so that is this way, so everything to the right of the Mississippi River now belonged to Great Britain. You can see the blue line right here that goes all the way to Louisiana. That's the Mississippi River, right up there. And now the Native Americans had lost their ally, which is like their partner, and their trading partner in the situation. Now, effect number 2. This is called the Proclamation of 1763. And it said that colonists were not allowed to move west or left of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, the Appalachian Mountains are right here. They go all the way from the south all the way up here. They're called a couple different things. They're the Great Smoky Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, but it's this mountain range that goes all along here. And it said the colonists had to stay on this coastline. And they needed to do that because we let the colonists let the Native Americans, you see it says Indian Reserve right here, keep this land. So this darker pink is the colonists, and then over here is Native Americans. Now, Britain was afraid that another war would start with the Native Americans if they didn't give them land of their own. So that was one of the driving factors for the Proclamation of 1763. However, that made a lot of the colonists pretty upset because they thought, hey, we just fought in this war for 7 years. And one of the main reasons we fought in this war was to get access to the Ohio River Valley over here. So they didn't really listen to this proclamation of 1763. A lot of colonists moved into that Indian Reserve anyway. And here's effect number 3. Debt. Debt is when you owe someone money that you can't pay back. Never a good thing. So Great Britain is saddled with a huge war debt from fighting the French and Indian War. So basically, Great Britain financed or gave all the money to the colonists in order to fight this war. They paid for soldiers, they paid for weapons, they built forts. This cost Great Britain so much money. The British Parliament, which was the government, said, hey, we paid all this money so the colonists could win this land. It's only fair that the colonists help pay us back by paying some taxes. So the British Parliament started taxing the colonists to help repay that debt. And what a tax is like, let's say you go to McDonald's and you're going to buy a $1 ice cream cone. It's never just $1. It's usually like $1.08. So that 8 cents is tax, and it goes to the government to pay for certain things. And the government usually decides what those taxes will pay for. Now, the British Parliament decided that they would tax the colonists to help make back some of that money they lost during the war. There's one more effect. So this image right here was made by Benjamin Franklin. And you can see it's a snake, and it's cut up into a few pieces. Now, if you look at these letters next to these pieces, you'll notice they kind of look like the abbreviations we have for states. And that's because these represent some colonies. So we've got New England here, we've got New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. So what this image was supposed to do was, it's based off an old story where a snake, it's like an old legend that you would cut up a snake and the snake would die unless the pieces were put back together before sundown. So he used this image to show that these pieces of the snake are separate, but if we come together, we can be whole, we can be more powerful. So Benjamin Franklin went to the Albany Congress, which is a group of leaders, to tell them we need to come together or join or die against the French. So these colonists learned some really sneaky types of war that were used by the Native Americans and the French. And the colonists came together to learn to fight as one group. So instead of being South Carolina, Virginia, New Jersey, they were colonies together with one common goal. Okay, guys. So I'm going to bring you to your assignments or your assignment, I guess, for today. So you're going to look at this page right here that's called War, and you have some questions here about causes and effects for a country going to war. And then you're also going to have this one today. So this is just you recapping what I said about the causes and effects. You can rewatch the video knowing that you need to go back and get these so that you can fill these little blanks out. All right. I talked for like 14 minutes. That's enough of me yabbering on. I will see you guys later. Bye.